In a world obsessed with rankings, two men dare to chisel greatness out of metaphorical granite, one wildly subjective opinion at a time. This show, every episode, we select four icons from a single topic and immortalize them in our own personal halls of fame. Subjective? Absolutely. Debatable? Always. Set in stone? Until next week. Welcome to the Mount Rushmore Show, where your top four says everything about you. I'm Mike Mintz. He's Joe Mintz. Basketball in full swing. Brackets busted already. Joe, you got yeah. I got a team that's not even in. We're talking. This is obviously basketball. Joe, set us up. What do you got going, man?
Yeah, unfortunately, my only college basketball jersey is UNC, and who I picked to go to the Elite Eight to only lose in the first round. Sorry, folks. But that's what March Madness is. Every year this comes, and I don't watch any college basketball at all. March comes around, I'm like, oh yeah, that thing's happening. I still don't care. Then I fill out a bracket. I watch one game, and I am all in. I'm last night I'm watching games. I'm peeking out at lunch. I'm following everything, man. I'm pretending I know it all. I'm a wizard, but the truth is, throw logic out the window. This isn't picking NFL playoffs or predictions. This is the person that picks based on colors, mascots, cities they've visited, colleges that sound fun to say out loud. I don't know. It makes no sense. Those are the brackets that tend to win. So I'm going into this very blind, hoping that it plays to my advantage um, because the tip off of the round of 64 has started and brackets have already been completely obliterated. And it never fails every year. People that spend hours, I mean, seriously, hours, breaking down these matchups. You've got your upset formulas, your Ken Pop tabs open, the group chats debating 12 versus 5 games, like life or death. And then within those first 12 hours, some team you barely watched all year, if at all, or even heard of, hits 11 threes, slows the game down, and knocks off a powerhouse. It almost happened to Duke, a 16 versus 1. Duke was the undeniable favorite to win the whole thing. And then brackets are already on life support. And we're seeing it this week. A couple double digit seeds making some statements. A few teams that nobody really talked about suddenly becoming the story. And you really can feel it. And one of these teams is about to become this year's Cinderella. We just don't know who yet. Which brings up the bigger question as we talk about Cinderellas in this episode. Why do we love this so much? Why does this tournament hit different than anything else in sports? Because as a society, we are wired to connect with the underdog, not the favorites, not the teams that are supposed to win, the ones that weren't supposed to be here, the ones that got overlooked, under recruited, underfunded, the ones walking into a game where everyone expects them to lose and then don't. I don't care if you had Duke winning the national championship in your bracket. You secretly wanted Siena to upset them. You connected with Siena. You don't connect with Duke. It's like Amazon versus your mom and pop. You know what I mean? Nowhere does that feeling hit harder than in March. Because of that, this tournament actually means to the players, especially the seniors. For a lot of these guys on these Cinderella teams, there is no next level. No NBA, no overseas career lined up. This is potentially their last game and their last season and their last time putting on that jersey. So when they step on the court, they're holding nothing back. They're diving for every loose ball, taking every charge, playing every possession like it's their last because it literally is. And on the other side, you've got these powerhouse programs, a lot of them with future lottery picks, guys projected top 10, top 5, maybe even number 1. And whether they admit it or not, there's a different mindset. There's a future beyond this moment. And that's where the gap kind of closes because in March, urgency really beats talent more often than we think. The team that has more belief, more desperation, more willingness to empty the tank, that's the team that wins. And that's how this tournament has evolved into what it is today. It's not just a championship anymore. It's brackets, office pools, buzzer beaters, and 3 straight weeks where productivity across the country just disappears. And every single year, logic goes out the window. It's why the person who wins the bracket is never the expert. like I said, cool colors, funny mascot. I've been to that city. Meanwhile, you got people over here with spreadsheets, metrics, matchup breakdowns, and you're eliminated by Saturday afternoon. And for as chaotic as it is, there has never been a perfect bracket. Not once. That's how unpredictable this tournament is. So for this Mount Rushmore, we're not just looking at the upsets. We're not even just looking at deep runs. We're looking at something bigger here. Moments that defined lives. Because the true Cinderella teams, this isn't just a hot streak. This is the peak of their careers. The story they will tell forever while selling insurance in whatever local town they went to school in. The reason they become legends in their communities. And because of that, for me, I'm eliminating some of the popular picks. I'll give you a couple examples here that won't be on my Mount Rushmore, and I'll explain why. Butler, VCU, Davidson. Incredible
Okay.
runs, but the stars from those teams went on to bigger things. Brad Stevens and Gordon Hayward at Butler. Who knew they would have had such a great NBA career? I mean, Brad Stevens still going with the Boston Celtics. Shaka Smart, who's still playing the tournament now with Texas. And a little guy you might remember named Steph Curry for Davidson. Who would have thought this little Cinderella guy out of nowhere would become one of the greatest basketball players, arguably top 10 of all time? So those runs weren't the peak for these guys. They were just the beginning. So the teams on my list, it was the guys that this is everything to them. This is their lives. They are telling the story today as the peak powers of their life.
I think that's, first of all, eloquently put, Joe, and on point for your setup here. Interesting that you pick that you eliminate both VCU and Butler. I want to say they were in the same tournament. Wasn't that the 2011 year that I think they played each other, didn't they?
Well,
Butler ends
Butler
up
had
winning.
two Cinderella years
Well,
back to
that's true.
back.
That's true. They lost on the last second to Duke, and then the next year they're actually a lower seed, and they defeated VCU. That was the Shaka Smart Havoc defense year.
Right.
Um,
Two Cinderella teams in the Final Four, which was a ton of fun.
yeah, that was crazy. And VCU was the first play-in team to make the Final Four, so that was a heck of a year for Cinderellas for sure.
Well, as I did the research, there's a lot of similar Cinderella type teams. So if I could find a way to eliminate some to make it easier for me, kind of like your brother doing Matt Damon and Ben Affleck movies together,
Together.
kind of a cheat code. So I guess that's my way. As I think of these runs, there's a lot to pick from because we get them every year, man. Some are better stories than others, but I want the guys that this was it. This is their defining moment forever. And for the guys on those other Cinderella teams, it felt like a Cinderella then. But as we look back on the careers of the players and coaches, it maybe was destined to happen.
Yeah, it's there's something about these underdog teams, and you kind of, you did a really good setup, so I'll be short, but the idea of like if you've seen the movie Hoosiers, Gene Hackman and this team in Indiana, the thing about basketball is it's not football, it's not one of these sports where size and everything really makes a difference. Basketball, anybody can really compete at any level, and Indiana, I'm pulling from it's not like from my research here, so if I'm wrong, Joe, correct me. But if I remember correctly, Indiana runs the regional basketball tournament, or at least they used to. And if you're sitting there going, well, what the heck is that? Essentially, they take all of the classes after the state tournaments, and then they run all the classes together in this giant tournament. In fact, that's the original March Madness. That's what they called it because all their state basketball tournaments were over in February. And so in March, they would do the regional, which all the classes would play against each other, which is insane, right? Because you have these little tiny class teams that have like 6 players total, against these big time powerhouses in Indiana, like out of Indianapolis and stuff. And that's where the original March Madness came from. Actually, they licensed the Big Dance has licensed the name March Madness from the regional tournament. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't done my research in quite a while. But that story of Hoosiers is a true one, and it's based on this really small school that ends up taking out the big powerhouses. And it's one of those things that really plays out in today's world now, 2026, when we're looking at teams like Siena almost beating Duke. And then you have what High Point is going over like what I don't even what seed
Maybe
were they? And
Wisconsin,
so
powerhouse.
and so you got these High Point, 12 seed. taking out Wisconsin.
We
And
see
so
the
yeah,
12 seeds every year do it.
yeah. And you were talking about busting brackets, and you have no idea. People will plan these things out, and it doesn't matter. Is the ones you weren't expecting are the ones that do it. And this it's so much fun to watch um, these games, even a 15 versus 2. It's like there's a chance, man. There's a chance out there. It could
There
happen.
is. I mean, we've seen it with the 16-1 with my local Baltimore team, UMBC, upsetting number one seed of Virginia.
And
And
they
then
were like the
Virginia
true
going
number
on the
one.
next year on a revenge tour to win the whole thing.
That UMBC game is one of the most important to me because Virginia wasn't just a one seed. They were the one seed getting taken out by a 16 seed. And of course, we'd never seen it before. And what is their team name? The Beagles? Is that right? Or something? Gold Retrievers? I'm not even sure.
You got it, the Retrievers. And
Not the
I remember
Beagles.
where
Yeah.
I was watching that game. I remember the euphoria at the bar we were at.
Oh my gosh.
As a Baltimore guy, a small school, that was a big deal for us. But that leads me to my criteria. This is a team that upset a behemoth, which had never been done before, the first ever 16 and only 16 to be the one. But they didn't go on a historic run after that. Their show ended the next round. So for you, Mike, in your criteria, are these teams that had to have won it all? Do they had to have made the Final Four? Do they have? Is there what? How did you base what considered a Cinderella?
They had to be um well, basically, it was just a numbers game for me. I didn't get as deep into the criteria this time. Essentially, you had to be an 8 or worse in order for me to consider you to be a Cinderella team. Butler was a 5. They don't count that year that they almost beat Duke. It's impressive, but the next year I think they're an 11, and so that would have been even more impressive. But I also have Butler left out. So that was my one criteria is you had to be, but you also had to play somebody. And I guess that's the other point too, is like sometimes you get like these 8 or 9 seeds and they play other teams, but there's upsets around them. And so they don't ever play a 1 or a 2. That's my two criteria. You had to be a low seed and you had to play at least one of the higher seeds too along the way and win.
I also eliminated many of the big programs, like Syracuse, for example, has been in a double-digit seed. It's made the Final Four. Same with, say, Kansas, Kentucky. Even UConn one year won the national championship as 11 seed. But I don't consider that team a Cinderella because of the level. They were kind of waiting for the tournament to turn it on. Incredibly talented, highly recruited team. I wanted to look at the underfunded guys that were just going to peak there, the smaller schools, with one exception, which will be the kickoff for mine.
All right, man. Well, did you want to kick off? I mean, you've already got it locked and
Usually I
loaded
let you
here,
go
so
first, Mike, but
I
if
know.
you're giving me the honors, I'll take it.
Dude, it sounds like you're ready. Let's hit it. So,
So I'm going to start with the origin story of underdogs. And this is one everyone's going to know. So I'll hit it off the bat. And that's NC State Wolfpack 1983. The one that set the tone for what we now call a Cinderella, led by many you know, Jimmy Valvano. NC State wasn't some dominant team all season. They were incredibly inconsistent. They struggled. They weren't feared. In fact, they had to win the ACC tournament just to get in. So coming into March, expectations were basically non-existent. But once the tournament started, they just kept finding ways, man. And I've seen a bunch of documentaries on this team. I think they believe they have a 30 for 30 on this group. Jimmy Valvano's obviously admired all throughout college basketball. Um, they were not blowing teams out. They were not dominating. They were just surviving by a hair in every game. Close game after close game, possession after possession, until suddenly they're in the national championship against the Houston Cougars. This is one of the most talented teams ever assembled. Five Slamma Jamma, um, Akeem Olajuwon, and then chaos. A missed shot, a scramble, a last second dunk, game over. Valvano, we all maybe remember from this clip, sprinting around the court, looking for someone to hug. It gives me goosebumps just watching the clip. That moment didn't just win a championship, it defined an entire team's legacy forever. And for those players, this wasn't a stepping stone. That was the moment. They became legends because of those few weeks. And that's why I have to start with them.
Well, Joe, we're going to share this one, and I think NC State is the perfect little underdog story because of the team that they went up against in the championship, and the whole thing. It's not like you look at NC State as the Wolfpack today and go, oh, these guys are a powerhouse team, or they're always going to be a perennial March Madness team, and so I think it's a perfect one to kick off. Jimmy Valvano is a hell of a story, right? And beyond this
Yes, he
game,
is.
yeah, beyond this game specifically, but like his whole career. And so to put him, to have this moment for him was a very big one. And of course, everybody knows the, never give up speech and stuff that he famously gave. But what a great story and what a great way to start, Joe.
He might, so that we're going to share that one, right, Mike?
Absolutely. Yep.
My next one is personal because it's a local DMV team that I know well, and that's the George Mason Patriots in 2006. They came into the tournament as an 11 seed with almost zero national attention. Mid major, under the radar, just happy to be there. At least that's what everyone thought. They then started taking down giants between Michigan State, North Carolina, and then UConn. And this is a UConn team at the time loaded with NBA talent, including DMV product Rudy Gay, a guy who left the area to go to a powerhouse, only to get knocked out by a school from his own backyard. And that's when it shifted. This wasn't just Cinderella, this became a regional movement. The entire DC, Maryland, Virginia area rallied behind George Mason. You weren't just watching, you were rooting, and they just kept going. And then all the way to the Final Four. Didn't win it all, but for that team, that run is everything. They didn't go on to bigger stages. They became hometown heroes because of just those few weeks.
Joe, we're two for two, man. George Mason, I'll remember this one forever. I was on deployment in Fort Lewis, Washington, and one of my kind of things that kind of took me out of that kind of that escape was watching the March Madness tournament. And George Mason were the heroes. I mean, the Cinderella team 11 seed, and the way they were beating teams wasn't, like they were not afraid to take on these top seeds. And I'll never forget that UConn. I'm a UConn fan. I've been a UConn fan forever. I
Miami
remember.
Dolphins, UConn
I know,
basketball.
right? What's going on here? But I remember that game specifically against UConn because UConn hit a last second three to send it to overtime. And I thought this is like just recently we saw, I can't remember which teams, but there was a last second three. It was a crazy stretch. And then just you sit there and you go, okay, now the favorite's got a better chance at overtime. And that just didn't happen. And UConn gets taken down. George Mason goes on to play Florida, who, by the way, goes on to win the national championship. And so in the Final Four as an 11 seed, that thing was nuts, man. And it was their attitude the whole way that just made it so much fun. These guys played like they were meant to be there, and that was a great team. So, yep, two for two, Joe.
Yeah, and George Mason is a team close to Georgetown, so they always I wouldn't even say they get compared to them. They're just like the ugly stepsister of Georgetown in this area. And to see them make the Final Four in Georgetown now was such a big deal and awakening for us in the DMV.
Also, from I teach history and government, Colonel Mason. I actually know who George Mason is in history, which always adds like a little bit of extra level to it. So it wasn't just
Yeah.
some guy.
Didn't even think of that. Of course, history guy. We need the facts here, Mike.
Yeah, yeah,
But
there
you
you
might have
go.
some facts about the next team I'm picking.
All right, who we got?
It would probably be more if you're studying, if you took Christian studies in college or high school or something. But that's the St. Peter's Peacocks, 2022. This is a modern day madness at its purest. They entered as a 15 seed. And historically, that means you are likely out in the first round, if not win one game was the most. Going into that, a 15 seed to beat a 2 seed once. So that was the expectation of Cinderella for them. And they didn't win just one. They kept going. They took down Kentucky, Murray State, and Purdue. And then they're in the Elite Eight. We're like, holy cow, this team going to make the Final Four. And the first 15 seed to ever do it, might I add. And what made this team different to me was no stars, no hype, no future NBA names, just a group of guys playing like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. For a few weeks, they became the most talked about team in the country. And that run didn't lead to bigger careers. That run was the career. That's what makes them a true Cinderella. Although they did make the Final Four, just the Elite Eight at that seed is incredible.
Yeah, you can't discount somebody at a 15 seed. I mean, you're lucky to see a 15 seed beat a two once in a tournament every 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
For this team to make the Elite Eight, to even get out of the Sweets, even get into the Sweet 16 is impressive. I think the only other team you said that happened before, I think it was Florida Gulf Coast, right? And I think they won Dunk City and they got all the way to the Sweet 16, but they didn't. Those guys were crazy too because they were throwing down dunks. The Peacocks, what a great name.
Fantastic.
Honestly, yeah, Joe, that's a great pick. I don't, we're not going to share this one, so we only went two for two, but it's a great one.
Well, who's your third then?
So I'm going with a team I call the Giant Killers, the 1986 LSU Tigers. They were an 11 seed, but here's the
Huh.
deal: if the tournament run was every single matchup, they knock off number six Purdue, number three Memphis State, then they beat number two Georgia Tech, and finally number one Kentucky. But they run out in the Final Four against Louisville. What a great run for LSU! 1986, first 11 seed to ever reach the Final Four. Took out number ones, number two, and number three seeds in the same region. Pretty crazy. So
I don't even know that about that team and that story.
yeah, this was something that was based on, it's not from my timeline. This was something I was doing the research and I was like, remember when I said my criteria, you got to beat somebody? I looked at that number one, number two, and number three seed and they defeated all of them. I was like, dude, this 1986 LSU Tigers team. And nobody, there's not like an NBA player on the list, man. This is long before Shaq. The guy, the star player's name was John Williams. And he was a double-double for the season average. But yeah, pretty interesting story nonetheless.
Have they been in the Final Four since?
Well, that's a great question. I know they've had good teams since. LSU's kind of a regular, I guess, football team, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good
Well, the
question.
SEC has become now the most competitive conference in college basketball. It wasn't always that way. I mean, you had Bama and Florida in the Final Four last year, whereas at most you had Florida previous to that. Now you got Auburn. I mean, Kentucky obviously is right there. Arkansas just won the conference. It's
That's a
much different
tough
now than it once
conference.
was. But historically, LSU has been kind of a joke of a basketball team, with the exception of a couple pro players like Shaq and Ben Simmons. But for the most part, they're not a tournament team with much history.
Yeah, unless I think that's another reason that I kind of flocked to this story. And it's one, you're right. It's not one that I knew about. I don't feel like it's one that's talked about a whole lot, but kind of deserves a little bit more love because of the amount of teams and the talent that they ended up beating on their road there. So
Sometimes when I see a team I know is so good at football, like Alabama, Clemson, LSU, and then I see they're good at basketball too, I'm like, come on, man. This is what Kentucky and Kansas need. They don't have that's all they got. Share the wealth here.
share it around a little bit. You still got one more, right, Joe?
I got one more. This is a fun one for me, and that's Loyola Chicago Ramblers in 2018.
Oh yeah.
This is the perfect storm of performance and story. They came in as an 11 seed. I'm noticing a theme here with seeds and Cinderellas. Completely under the radar, but once the tournament started, they just executed at an elite level. Close games, clutch shots, couple buzzer beaters. They just kept winning. And then they became something bigger than basketball. You may remember this. Sister Jean. Do you
How
remember
old
her?
was Sister Jean? She was old, like in her
97
90s.
years old, courtside, praying with the team. She instantly became the face of the tournament. And at that point, it wasn't just about Loyola. It felt like the entire country was rooting for them, and they went all the way to the Final Four.
Hmm.
They created a moment that transcended the sport, and for those players, that's a story they'll tell forever. And Sister Jean, now rest in peace, will always be remembered for the prayer that got them to the Final Four and changed those players' lives.
That's a great story, and I love the Sister Jean. I remember she was this old lady, with
Yeah,
the prayer beads, and
wheelchair, I believe, on the court side.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. In Loyola, Chicago, a school I'd never heard of before or since, really, other than this story.
Miami,
So
Ohio.
yeah, it's one of those. It's like, where's the Loyola? This is the one in Chicago. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's a great story, and I love the fact that they made the Final Four. And here's one of the things about this show, Joe, is like we didn't have a lot of champions so far. think you've only had what? Just NC State so far that actually won it.
Yeah, I did think about Villanova
The
in
85 Villanova. Yeah.
the upset the greatest college basketball team in Georgetown that one year to win it all.
Yeah, was that
Um,
Ewing? Yeah.
yeah, Patrick Ewing never between the NBA and NCAA just couldn't pull it off on really talented teams. But Villanova was the what people would say the greatest upset in college basketball history in a championship game. But I, it's hard, man. I mean, these are for me. I wasn't around then. It was the moments that I remember most. I mean, Jimmy Valvano's story just resonates all centuries and decades at this point. But the other ones I was very intimate with.
Well, and I think that's my larger point here is that these teams don't have to win it all in order to etch their places in our memories, right? Like even an Elite Eight appearance for a 15 seed is going to never be forgotten. And I think that's one of the things. It's really hard to win a national championship, even as a one seed or a two seed to make it even to, a Final Four or an Elite Eight as an 11 seed is something that, especially with a story like that combined with it. So, all right, Joe, we're not going to share, and I got my one. And I know, obviously, since you've done all four and you've also already eliminated these guys in your pregame, but I got to go with 2008's Davidson Wildcats,
That
10
was fun.
seed, the Steph Curry year. All right, so a little bit of story here. Um, Back in the day when I actually like followed college basketball and all, I had a sports show on the radio and I was hardcore into this stuff. We used to do a Calcutta where you would buy teams. It was all for like charity, right? But there was money to be made. But you would literally
This
buy teams.
pre-FanDuel, folks.
That's right. You would buy teams, and you had to pay. And so, like for a 16 seed, you could get them for $20, right? But you want a one seed, it's going to be in the thousands, okay? And these guys were a 10 seed, and I remember leading up to the Calcutta, and then the day of the Calcutta, these guys went for almost as much as a 4 seed or a 5 seed went. There was so much money being spent because everybody believed in one dude, and that's kind of crazy. That Steph Curry run for Davidson, he would be triple teamed. Watching those games is nuts because you could not stop this guy in college. You knew the whole time watching him, you're like, that guy is something special, and he went on to be something special. And sometimes that doesn't play out. I remember Ed O'Bannon for UCLA. Everybody thought he was going to be the next big thing, and he just failed in the NBA. And sometimes it doesn't translate college to pro. But Steph Curry is one of those stories that it's like even at the time you could see it. You're like, yeah, he averaged 32 points per game, shot 44% from the three-point line, handled Gonzaga, who's a perennial team in the tournament. They took down number two Georgetown, losing in a heartbreaker to number one Kansas, who went on to become the eventual number one champion. I don't think anybody thought Davidson was going to win it all necessarily, but everybody thought they were going to do some upsets, and boy, did they. What a great story.
I remember most that Kansas game in the Elite Eight
Oh,
when they have the
yes.
ball, the last possession, and you know where it's going. You know it's going to Steph, and you think it's going to happen. And when it doesn't, the letdown, man, it's like that we just needed one more lick of magic to keep this thing going. He was the most fun player I've ever watched in March, hands down. And he was a player before his time with his style. We've seen players like him before, the guy shooting half court shots, but that's about it, right? They come in March and then they go. And then he that helped his draft. I don't think without that tournament he would have been a first round pick. That made incredible awareness to him. And he ended up being 7 overall, which just to understand, 7 is equivalent to like a second round in the NFL. It's
hmm
not a blue chip per se, unless you're if you're outside the top 5. But it was a risky pick at number 7 for him. And he changed the game of basketball. But at the time in college basketball, that was something we had never seen translated to the NBA. It was more physical game where you needed LeBron James types, Tracy McGrady's, Carmelo's that could get in the paint a little bit bigger and thicker. You didn't see little guys like that could just shoot deep balls, find success. And he changed the NBA. But it started at Davidson.
It did, and to this Davidson story, this is the one that I just wanted to talk about. It's like we have all of these upsets. We don't know they're going to happen, right? You want to watch the game's on, so you're going to watch it, and then as it gets close, people are like, "Hey, turn it on, turn it on." You're going to see an upset. That Davidson team, everybody tuned in expecting it to happen, and then it does. A 10 seed, and then became appointment viewing. When's Davidson? When's Curry playing?
Yes.
So. for sure.
I don't think he's the example of the guy telling the story selling cars in wherever the
No.
town Davidson is in Ohio or whatever.
Yeah.
He moved on to pretty nice things. I like the peaked in high school kind of stories. Just resonate more with me, knowing that's all they got.
No,
But
it's a
great story
yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Well, this was a fun one, Joe. There's been a couple upsets we've already talked about. Is your, is your bracket completely busted or are you still hanging on in there?
Well, I got some predictions. I mean, UNC, that sucked. Losing the first round. That's where research would have helped when I found out their best player is injured. I
Yeah.
did not know that. I went in blind. And then I picked St. Mary's for no reason to go to the Elite Eight. And they lose in the first round, of course. So that hurt. But I got some more predictions hot predictions that are alive. St. Louis, I'm predicting
hmm
shocks the world, takes down one seeded Michigan, and rides that momentum into the Sweet 16. And then my big call is St. John's, the Johnnies, everyone's favorite team right now with Rick Pitino taking over since last year. They're a 5 seed, but they won the Big East. They've caught some fire late, and I'm picking them to ride it all the way to the national championship game, only to lose to Virginia.
Well, that's pretty good, man.
Yeah, everyone's
I
picking Duke and Arizona. You got to go different to win these things.
I actually like the Michigan being upset pick. I don't think Michigan should have the 1 seed, and I don't really think that's that bold of a take. Michigan is going to lose in their own regional tournament to Purdue, and it was a close-ish game, but Michigan was pretty well handled in that one. I thought them getting the 1 seed was kind of a bit of a reach. They handle Howard in the first round, but St. Louis is legit, and that might be a good upset pick right there, Joe. I kind of agree with you. So,
Yeah, and I picked St. Louis based on nothing else that a show I'm watching on TV is based in St. Louis.
well, there you
That's
go.
that's how I made the decision because if anything is proven over history, those are the picks that pay off.
Though,
Because there will always be year after year a team nobody saw coming. There'll be moments that just don't make sense. And for a few weeks in March, a group of players will play like it's their last chance because for many of them it is. And that's what makes a Cinderella.
awesome. Well, I think that's the perfect little wrap up here. Joe, is there anything else you wanted to tie in before we head out?
Let's have fun watching some ball, folks. Let's pretend like we've been experts all year, even though we know nothing.
I love to go out to like a little bar or restaurant, watch the games on the TV with the crowd and everybody's cheering. Like
Yes.
that's a great experience, man.
That's the vibe. Get yourself out of the house, go to Buffalo Wild Wings in town, and high five a stranger when you see High Point buzzer beater to get it to overtime.
All right, man. Well, that's our picks, the Cinderellas of history right here in March Madness. But the real question is, what would you carve onto your mountain? Until the next episode, I'm Mike Mintz. He's Joe Mintz, and this is the Mount Rushmore Show.